Alright, this is Murdoch Rummel from the forums, and I just got my synthesis today. I got my second and third one, and my first one I set up with dual wick, dual coils, and I had never actually done that before, and it seemed to work out really good for me. And I noticed I hadn't made a coil wrapping video, so I figured I would. So that's what we're going to do. So this is basically the synthesis, how it looks under the hood. Okay, you've got your positive post, you've got two negative posts, two wick holes, and a fill hole. The first thing you're going to do is you're going to take your mesh, whatever mesh you decide to use. I'm using 500 mesh. Let me take this off of here. And the cool thing about this, it comes with a GG adapter ring that you can take off and use it for other mechanical mods. But this, I mean, it makes a great stand with the GG adapter. So even if you don't have a GG, I mean, don't just throw that thing in your vape bag and forget about it. And you're basically going to roll your mesh to size. Now this is unoxidized mesh. Generally I do a couple VG burns, but I figured I'd just try to get this Peter K method down and everything without it, because the VG burns just kind of speed up the break-in period is all it really does. So you're going to get two wicks that fit in there, and right now we're just going to set them aside. Generally I have assigned holes as to which wick goes where, just because I know it'll fit in there. Next thing you're going to need is Canthol. Using 32 gauge Canthol. Generally I use 28 gauge, but this device that I'm using it on, it's a variable wattage, and it'll go up all the way to 20 watts, which is good because I usually vape very high wattage. But I tried my other synthesis on there that was ringing in with the dual wicks at like 0.6, 0.7 ohms, and it would just not get, this device wouldn't recognize it. So it's got safety features involved in there and everything. So you're going to get so I figured I'm going to wrap a fairly large wick or high ohm, probably not high, but fairly high ohm coil, because I'm going to be putting it on this regulated wattage thing, so it doesn't really matter. The only thing I've got to pay attention to is the number of coils, because I want my two coils to match. So basically what I'm doing is I've got my coil, and I'm going to put it under that first negative post. Jink. And tighten it down. Now I'm using a precision screwdriver, jeweler's screwdriver, whatever you want to call it. Now if you buy like a kit of these, there's like a bunch of different sizes, and if you notice I'm using the flathead. That's only because I've misplaced my Phillips. You're generally going to want to use the Phillips because those are Phillips heads, and you don't want to risk stripping it. So, alright, so once I get that in, you're not going to want to break off your lead yet, because you might need it for adjustments or whatever. But then the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to take this and I'm going to work it, and you shouldn't have to work it in hard, but it's just going to drop in. It's not going to go in all the way. I don't want it to go in all the way. There's no need for it to go in all the way. You could use something else that fits in there. A lot of people use a drill bit, but I'm the type of person, I like to use one tool while I'm doing this. So if I can do it with one tool, great. If I can't, I get more frustrated. So got that in there, and I'm basically just gonna wrap. I've decided I'm probably going to do 7 wraps. That's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And while it's here, you can adjust your coils basically and figure out what's going on and get them evenly spaced. Alright, and now we're going to go around the back of this thing all the way to the other side, okay? And we're going to hold it down on the bottom while we take this out. And now what we're doing here is basically holding the coil in place while we tighten. Now when you noticed when I did tighten it a little bit, it did turn. You might not have seen it, but you can see it's turned to the side a little bit. No worries. You just work it back over. I mean, people stress about these coils, but they're actually more forgiving than a lot of people think. And right now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of my pieces of mesh and drop it in my hole. Now this is strictly to keep the coil in place while I'm working on the second coil. Alright, now what I'm going to do, I make sure that this positive post is tight, make sure that this negative post is open. And it might be hard for you guys to see, but what I'm basically going to do is pretty much get as close to that positive post as I can and grab the coil or the wire right there and then just start working. 3, 4, 5. If you run out of room, just push it back up. 6, 7. Okay. And then I'm going to tilt it back and drop it in my hole. Okay. Now what that basically did is we have one continuous circuit, basically, if you will. And you can tighten it by applying tension and just slowly bouncing it up and down, and it'll basically tighten that top little part if you happen to get it too loose. But now I'm just adjusting my coils, and I want to make sure 1, 2, 3, 4 that they at least have the same number of wraps. Now this bottom coil is extremely low. I want to try to get that up some. So alright. So space out my coils and drop it under that screw, which happened to tighten up for some reason. Okay. I'm sorry, I haven't really done a video like this, so now I understand when people are talking saying, oh, this is hard to do in front of the camera. I get it now. But, so, basically again just applying tension to it to keep the coil in place while we work this out and tighten our coil. And at this point, drop that back in there. Anytime you're messing with something that might mess with the tension of your coil, you want to make sure something's in there. So as I'm popping this lead off, I want to make sure there's some form of tension in there to keep the coil shape. And I hate it when that happens. Alright. And I'll drop that in there just to make sure it fits. And right now, well, we'll be back for part 2.